secure your Spring Boot REST APIs.
Talk about our security filter. URL should be permitted with the test user. And
hello everyone, a very warm welcome to Think Constructive. I am Isha. In this session, I will be discussing how to secure your Spring Boot REST APIs. This session is going to be extremely helpful for all the Java developers, Java leads and Java architects. So stay tuned, watch the session till the end so that you are not going to miss upon on any of the core concepts. And also if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now because such kind of session I'll continue bringing on the channel. Alright, so let us quickly start with the session now.
have you ever imagined that you have built an amazing Spring Boot application, but you have not secured it? What will happen the moment you will deploy it? Anyone can access any amount of data from your application, or they can insert, update or delete anything from your application. There is no control over it. So how to control that? Your application has to be secured in many sense. That means your application has to be authenticated as well as authorized. If someone is accessing your application, user has to be authenticated first. That means the user is allowed to log in. User is allowed to access your application first of all. And when the user is allowed to access the application, what kind of stuff he or she can access? Whether he is allowed to see or access all the data of your application, or the person is allowed to see only a limited amount of data from the application. Similarly, whether user is allowed to insert or record any data in your application or not. So such kind of controls are called authorization. First of all, user should be verified, and once the user is verified, what user can do and what user cannot do in your application. Such kind of stuffs are extremely important in any of the application. Here we are talking in terms of Java Spring Boot application, but such things are essential for any application developed in any programming language using any framework. Alright, so here we will be discussing it in terms of Java Spring Boot application. And to securing your Java Spring Boot application, what is the way out we have? What is the method we have? We have the Spring Security in place. Alright, so Spring team has given us the Spring Security, which is an extremely powerful authentication and authorization framework. And it gets integrated seamlessly in your Spring Boot application. So make developers' life easy and secure your applications also. Alright, so here are some key features which I am displaying on the screen for your ready reference. So I'll just quickly read out the Spring Security key features for you. So it is the de facto standard for securing Spring Boot applications, or rather Spring based applications. It provides a powerful support for authentication and authorization. It provides protection against session fixation, clickjacking, cross-site request, forgery, etc. And it provides servlet API integration. And there are many more. I have just displayed some of the key points here. Alright, I hope now you understand why securing your applications are very important and how does Spring Security help here. Now let us quickly start with the Spring Security demonstration. So I will start with the internal call flows of the Spring Security because those are very important to understand, and that will be followed by the detailed demonstration. Alright, so here is the high level diagram. Let us first understand when a normal GET request comes, what happens. Let us say HTTP GET request is coming here. Okay, it will reach to a servlet engine. Okay, so this dark gray box, this is the servlet engine, and for the time being just ignore this filter layering. Okay, I'll come back to that. Let us first understand what happens when a normal GET request reaches to servlet engine. It will be taken care by front controller, which is in the Spring world dispatcher servlet. So all the requests will come to dispatcher servlet, and it is a typical design pattern that is called as front controller, which comes into picture here. So the GET request reaches here to the front controller, and front controller will dispatch the request to the controller. Controller will do all the necessary processing for the request. Let's say in case of GET, it will go ahead, fetch the data and return the data back to the dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet will return response back in terms of HTTP response. It will go back to the client. Alright, so this is the very high level overview of what happens when a GET request reaches to the servlet engine. Now, there is something else which is called as filter chain. Okay, so this blue box you can see, this is the filter chain, and there are many filters, n number of filters are available here. What these filters will do? These filters will do the job of pre-processing and post-processing kind of stuffs. That means before reaching to the front controller, if there is anything else which needs to be done in the GET request, that will be done here at the filter level. Okay, and when the response comes back, that response, if any post processing is needed, that will be done here at the filter level in the response. Alright, so now here let us talk about our security filter. So obviously if any GET request is coming from some user XYZ, before reaching that request to the actual controller, right, we would want that request to be checked whether that request is authenticated or not, whether that request is authorized or not. So that part is also taken care at the filter level, right? So for that, Spring Security has given us this delegating filter proxy, and inside that filter chain proxy you can notice here. This filter chain proxy is encapsulated inside delegating filter proxy, and this will delegate the request further to the security filter chain here. You can see a number of security filters I have written here. So then what happens? So this request before reaching to front controller is delegated to security filter chain. And now what this security filter chain will do? It will do the necessary security stuffs on the request. So in our example, it will authenticate the user. Let's say it will check the username and password. If he has not given anything, response will go back to the end user or to the client that they should be providing the username and password. Okay, now the username and password is reached here. Now their username and password will be authenticated. If that is verified, validated, now the next step is to check whether that particular user is allowed to access that GET resource or not. Alright, if it is allowed, then the remaining controller processing will take place. Okay, this is the very high level overview how the Spring Security intercepts and pre-process all the requests before reaching to the front controller or dispatcher servlet. Okay, I will show you one more diagram, but that detailing I will do in my subsequent sessions, because everything if I will tell you right now, it will be little difficult to connect. Alright. So we discussed till here security filter chain. So if Spring Security is applied, request will reach to security filter chain, and what this security filter chain will do, it will further talk to authentication manager, okay, which is an interface, and there are different provider managers. One of the provider manager is DAO authentication provider, which is typically responsible to talk to the database, okay. And there are many other providers. You can write your own providers also. Once the complete authentication is done, the details will be set into security context holder, which will have authentication object, and the essential components are principal, authorities, and credentials. Alright, so once the complete authentication and authorization is done, security context holder is set, and accordingly the response is sent back. Alright, I will keep coming back to this diagram once we will start our implementation. So first I will show you how the basic authentication can be implemented with the help of Spring Security, and then the session will be further evolved for the JWT authentication also. Alright, let us quickly start with the demonstration now. So this demonstration we will be doing with our bookstore project, which we have built in our last session, which we have done with the Spring Boot and MongoDB project. So just in case if you want to know how to build REST API with the Spring Boot and MongoDB, so go ahead, watch that session. For this demonstration, I will give you a quick overview of the project so that you can understand what all changes we are doing. Alright, in this project we are building an online bookstore, okay, and we have built our get, put, post, delete APIs. That means all the CRUD operations along with the get all. So here is the controller. In book controller, you can see we have done get by book ID, get all, post, put and delete operations. Alright. And for that we have done a book DTO and also we have done book entity. Okay, so entity will be for storing data in the database. It will be used. So book DTO will be used for sending and receiving the request via REST APIs. Alright, we have also built its converter. Okay, from book DTO to entity, entity to DTO, and the repository layer, which will be further talking to Mongo database. Alright, and also the service implementation. Okay, and here is the starting point for the Spring Boot application, which is annotated with @Spring Boot application. Alright, so these things we have done in our last session. Also for MongoDB, we have taken its Docker image. So here is a compose.xml for that. And here is the pom.xml for our entire project. Alright, let me just quickly close all other files. I'll just keep open book pom.xml right now. So we'll start doing the changes from here from pom.xml. Okay, so our agenda is to secure this online bookstore application. So I would highly recommend you will code along with me. So if you haven't done the project, you can make use of the Git link which I have mentioned in the description box below for this project. You can quickly clone the project and code along with me from here itself. It's up to you. How do you want to do it? Alright, so here is my pom.xml. First I will show you what is there. Okay, so Spring Boot starter parent with version 3.4.1. Alright, so down below Java version 23 we are using. And then you can notice Spring Boot starter data Mongo dependency we are using, Spring Boot starter web dependency we are using, and Spring Boot dev tools we are using as of now. Also Spring Boot Docker compose we are using. Okay, and then down below there is a test dependency. Okay, so this much we are using as of now. Let us now include Spring Security here and see what happens. Okay, so how do we include Spring Security dependency? Let us go back to the browser window. Here is the browser window. I will quickly take a Spring dependency from Spring Initializer itself. So I will just say Spring Initializer. Okay, and from Spring Initializer, let it be Java, Maven, Spring 3.4.2. Let other things remain as is. Okay, I will just say add dependencies and I will give Spring Security. Okay, you can see highly customizable authentication and access control framework for Spring application. I will choose that and I will say explore. Okay, I will go down. So here is the Spring Boot starter security dependency and I would like to take its test dependency also. So I will copy this entire block and will remove unwanted stuff. Okay, so here in pom.xml, so below Docker Compose I will just include the dependency. So you can notice Spring Boot starter test is appearing twice in our pom.xml, so I'll remove one. Okay, so now we have got Spring Boot starter security and security test, both the dependencies. Okay, I will just refresh Maven. Okay, so that it gets what happened. Pom.xml has syntax error. Let me see what mistake I have done. Okay, got it. So this is also copied by mistake, so let us remove. Okay, so let us save this. After fixing this issue, let us do a Maven refresh. Okay, so I will go to tools window and will say Maven. Okay, where is that? Yeah, and I will just say Maven refresh. Okay, Maven refresh is done. That means it has downloaded the required security libraries. Alright, so now let us go ahead and test the application. Oh, before that I should start the application. Alright, so I have started my application and let us see if everything is fine. So here in the console log you can see started bookstore application at port 8080. Okay, I will come back here and will explain you some more stuff, but before that let us test it. Let us see what changes are there now. So here is a browser window and here I will simply say local host 8080 and then this bookstore. Okay, and then slash. Let me just hit enter and see. If you remember, earlier we were able to see whatever books are available in the bookstore the moment we hit this URL. But now this time it is showing me login and password window. That means security is enabled in our application. Although we have just included the libraries, we have not given any username and password. So you must be thinking, what should we enter here? So by default, Spring Security provides you the login with the default username as user. Okay, and the password we should be taking from here in the console. So auto generated password. Okay, using generated security password. Right. So what happens the moment we enabled Spring Security? You can see some changes in the log. User details service auto configuration. Okay, and then you are getting a security password which is auto generated by Spring Security. And also there is a message, this generated password is for development use only. Okay, so that means in the production application, obviously you'll not be every time going to console getting some generated password and inputting that. No, not that one. But yeah, for building the basics and understanding the complete stuff, we should understand all these things, and then we'll go ahead and build up and expand the application so that it can be deployed to the production. All right, and down below you can also see here in the log, initialize user details manager configurer, global authentication manager configured with user details service bean with name in memory user details manager. That means in memory user details manager is holding this auto generated password with the default username as user. So let me just copy this password. Okay, and we'll come back here, we'll paste the password and see whether we are now allowed to sign in or not. Okay, and you can also see the URL change here. Okay, let me hit sign in. I'll not save it, and you can see now we are able to get the data. So currently in my database we have got two books, B2 and B3. All right, now let us log out from this and see whether we are able to find out the book B2 specifically or not. All right, so how to log out, how to do a logout. So now try logging out and try to find out specifically book B2. That is another URL. Okay, so let us log out. Hit log out. Are you sure? Yes. So we have been signed out. Now let us try to hit another URL of our application, that is bookstore. Okay, and here this time I will give B2 because specifically I want to see whether I can find out only book B2 or not. I'll just hit enter. See, again it is asking for username and password. Let me just give username as user and password. I hope it is copied still. I will just try to sign in. Alright, so now what is it giving? It is giving me specifically the details for book B2. That means I am able to access all the exposed URLs with the help of this username and password. Alright, so let us now log out from here also. Yes, I would like to log out. Alright. So now we understand that by default Spring Security will provide us the username and some auto-generated password, and with that we are able to secure the application. But now the suggested thing, you can use these things for the basic testing purpose in your development environment, but for production it's not suggested. Okay. So now let us bring down the server and see some more stuffs. Okay. Now I would like to give a specific username and password. How do I do that? Let us quickly open application.properties, and here in application.properties I am allowed to enter a user and password. Okay, so let us try doing that. I will just say Spring Security .user.name, alright, is equal to whatever username you would like to give. So let me just give test user. Okay, and also I should be writing a password here. Okay, although it's not a good practice to write a password in plain text, but for the demo purpose and just to building the basics, let us try doing that. Okay, so user dot password. Okay, whatever password you would like to give. So let's say pass1 I am giving. Okay, so I have entered a username and password, and let us see whether we get auto-generated password or not, or what happens. Okay, so let us now bring up the application. So you can see my application is up and running. I'm getting the application started message, Tomcat message, and also I am getting Global Authentication Manager configured with user details service with bean name this. So that means security is still working. It's enabled. There is nothing wrong with the security, but this time I'm not getting auto-generated password. That means this thing has overridden the auto-generated password default functionality. Okay, so that means this time I should be able to enter or log in with the help of test user and pass1. So let us try doing that. Okay, so we'll come back to browser window. So here is a browser window, and again let us try accessing the URL as bookstore. All right, enter. So it is again asking for username and password. Let us give test user, test user and password as what we have given, pass1, enter. See, I am able to access the details with the test user and pass1 which we have just now entered in our application.properties. That means the in-memory user details object is now containing test user and pass1 as the password. All right, so default generated auto-generated username and password are now overwritten with this, but now so I want to have more than one users. Okay, not restricted to only test user. Let's say I want to have test user 1, 2, 3 till 10, and also I want to have admin. How do we do that? I'll just bring down the application. Okay, and now in order to do that, first of all, let us comment this. All these things I am explaining you so that the basics are clear and we will further evolve the application. All right. So in order to have multiple users in our application, we should be creating a beans of user details service. Okay. So let us have a configuration for our security. So let me just create a class called security config, and let us have that class inside config package. Okay, so config.security config. Oh, all right. So I'll just hit enter. So here is my public class security config. So first of all, let us annotate this class as a configuration because this is going to hold the configurations related to security, and also let us enable security here. So for that we will be giving enable web security. Alright, so these are the two essential annotations we'll be putting. One is to mark it as a configuration class and it's going to hold the Spring Security configuration. And also another one is for enabling web security. So now inside this class, what we'll do, we'll create our user details service. Alright, so let us create a user details bean. Okay. So I'll create this bean, okay, and let us annotate this as bean, okay. And now inside this, what is it expecting? It is expecting me to return the object of user details service. All right, so let us build that object and return that. So what do I want? I want to create multiple users. How do we do that? For that, we should be using the user details object, okay. And let's say I want to say user details 1, okay, and we'll give the object as user dot with username, okay, and here inside username whatever username I would like to give. So let's say I give user 1, okay, then the password for user 1, pass1, okay, and then build. Okay, so user details 1 is now created. Let us create one more user details, user details 2 is equal to user dot with username, okay, and here let's say I give user 2, all right, and then the password for user 2, okay, let's say I give pass2, okay, and then let us build this. Okay, so we have built two user details object. Let me create one more for admin, okay, user details dot, sorry, for this I will just give the name as admin and I will just say user dot with username, and here I will give admin, okay, and now I will give its password admin1, okay, and we'll build that. All right, so we have created 3 users and now let us build the user details service object for that. How do we do that? We will just say return new. Since all these things we will be keeping in memory as of now, because currently we are not interacting with the database, I will show you how to do that. But first, let us do that in memory things. So I will create the object of in memory user details manager, and herein I will pass all the users which we have just now created. User 1, user 2 and admin. All right, and we'll return that. Okay, so now what we have done, we have created 2 users, 1 admin, in total 3 users, and we have created one in-memory user details manager object and we are returning that. Now let us bring up the application and see what happens. So now my application is up and running and let us see what is happening here. You can see Global Authentication Manager configured with User Details Service bean with name User Details Service. All right. So now let us test this application and see what happens. So we'll go back to browser window. So here is the browser window. Let us first log out this application. I'll just say log out. All right. So now let us start accessing bookstore / enter. It is asking for username and password. So we have given user 1, Okay, and password what we have given? Pass1, I guess. Enter. So password is right, but still it is giving me error. Let us see what is it giving. It's saying given that there is no default password encoder configured, each password must have a password encoding prefix. Either prefix this password with noob or set a default password encoder. Alright, so what is happening here? It is restricting me to use the plain text password. But if I would still like to use it, it is asking me to prefix it either with noob or at least specify some password encoder. Alright, so good practice is we'll go ahead and specify a password encoder. Let us quickly create a bean for password encoder. So I will say bean. Okay, enter. And then I will just say password encoder. Okay, we'll give a name, let's say password encoder. And inside this, I will just return the instance of BCryptPasswordEncoder because this is what we are going to use. So BCryptPasswordEncoder, that's it. You can see BCryptPasswordEncoder is provided by Spring Framework Security.crypto.bcryptPasswordEncoder. Alright, so you can go ahead and check this library if you want. Let me just download the sources here. And you can go ahead and see implementation of password encoder that uses a bcrypt strong hashing function. Clients can optionally supply a version, a strength, and secure random instance. The larger strength parameter, more work will have to be done to hash the password because that will make the password stronger. The default value is 10. If you want, you can provide a bigger number to make it more strong. Alright. So let us come back to security config and provide this password encoder here. Alright. So here in the password method, we will just call this password encoder. Okay. Dot encode. And inside this encode, we should pass this pass1, which is our password. Alright. Similarly, we will do the changes here. Password encoder dot encode, and inside this encode we should be passing this. Alright, and then here also password encoder dot encode, and then this admin1 as a password. Alright, so we have encoded the password. Let us save, restart the application and see what happens. So here we can see our application is up and running. Okay, let us go back to browser window and test. So here let us give the bookstore URL. Okay, and now it is redirecting us to the login page. We will give user1 and password as pass1. Alright, sign in. So this time I am able to see the data. Okay, now let us log out and try with another user. Okay, so what is my another user? So let us test it with admin1 and sorry, I think it was admin and password was admin1. Enter. I'm able to get the data, right? Cool. Now let us log out from here. Okay, no issues, no exception. I'm able to log in and see the details. Now, next thing, what if I would want really this admin to act as admin, right? That means I would want this admin to see the particular data and this user 1 and user 2 to see some other amount of data. I don't want that whatever data, all data my admin can see, user 1 can also see. No, user 1 has to be restricted, right? User 2 has to be restricted to some extent. They can see only a limited amount of data, whereas admin can see the whole amount of data. All right, that's how the application should be made. So if I want to apply the role-based access, this terminology is called role-based access, right? Or authorization. How do we do that? Let us see. For that, let us first implement the security filter chain. If you remember the diagram, we have seen so many security filters were there in the security filter chain. Okay, and we are intercepting and we are applying our functionality in between, right? Like we have entered our user details, and now these users I want to have the role-based access. How do we do that? For that, let us first do some stuffs in the security filter chain, and for that we will be implementing a security filter chain here. Okay, then only we can go in between and do some stuffs. So I will just say public security filter chain. You can see this is already provided by Spring Framework Security, and we will write our security filter chain method here. Okay, and let us annotate this as bean. Now inside security filter chain, what is expected? Expected is to return security filter chain object. Okay, we will do that, but before that we need to build that object. Also, the security filter chain should have HTTP security. Okay, and here now with the help of this HTTP security, we will be writing certain stuffs, and then we will be returning this security filter chain object. Now with the help of HTTP security, we will be doing some stuffs and will be returning that. All right. So how do we do that? We will just say HTTP security dot authorize HTTP request. Okay. And here we will just say request dot request matchers. Okay, I will explain you this, just give me a minute. And here I would want book test /welcome URL should be authorized for any user. Okay, this URL I would like can be accessed by any user because I want to show some welcome message, so anyone can see that, right? No authorization or anything is needed. What do I want? I would like to say permit all. That means this URL book test, not test, sorry, our URL is a store, right? So bookstore /welcome should be allowed for every user. All right. Other than that, if there is any other request, get, put, post, delete, anything else from my bookstore, it should be authenticated. What do? I will just say any request dot authenticated. Fine. Let me just take this to the above line itself. Fine. Why I'm getting this error? Let me see. Okay. Let us add the exception. Fine. So what we have done? We have put a restriction that whatever request is coming, if the URL is this, no further authentication is needed. If there is any other URL, it should be authenticated. All right. Now, let us apply some more stuffs. We will do HTTP basic, and I'll just explain you. So customizer we will be writing with defaults. Okay, and so let us go inside HTTP basic and see what is there. So what is our HTTP basic? This configures HTTP basic authentication. All right, so we are doing basic authentication. So for configuring basic authentication, we will be using HttpSecurity.http basic. Okay. Now also make our application as stateless. Okay. So what do I do? HttpSecurity.session management. Okay. And in that session management, I will just say session. Okay. And with that session, I will just say session creation policy, and I will mark this policy as stateless. Okay. So these are some enums which are created. I will just select stateless because this is how I want it. All right. And also let us do one thing. Let us disable our CSRF. So what do I do for that? HttpSecurity.CSRF. Here inside this, I will just say CSRF customizer. And then I will say CSRF customizer dot disable. Okay. So this will disable CSRF on HTTP security. Okay. So what we have done, we have disabled CSRF, we have written the authorization, we have defined which URL should be permitted by all user and which should not. Then we have defined our HTTP basic authentication. Then we have defined that it should be sessions should be stateless. Then finally let us build this HTTP security and return. All right. So what do? I will just say return HTTP. What happened? Return HTTP security dot build. All right. So we will build and return HTTP security object. All right. So this is how a security filter chain can be written. If you want, you can combine all these things with so many dots and directly return from here. Up to you. All right. So we have built our security filter chain. We have defined this URL, but let us see whether we have this URL in the application or not. So I'll go back to my book controller, and here I don't think so I have defined any welcome URL yet. So let us write it. Okay. So how do we write that? We will just say get mapping, and inside that I will just give the URL within double quotes, and since bookstore is defined above itself, so I'll just remove that. Okay. Bookstore is up, right? So I will just say /welcome, and then I'll be writing a method for that. What should happen when this bookstore welcome request comes? So I will just say public get, or simple we will write welcome message. Okay. And simply we will return a welcome message from here. I should write the return type. Let me just give it as a string, or let us give it as response entity. Okay. And here we should have it as a string. I will just say return new response entity, and here I will just give a welcome message. Welcome to the bookstore. Okay. And then I will give HTTP status dot okay. Fine. Semicolon. Fine. So we have exposed the welcome endpoint. There is a welcome message, and this is allowed for all the users. Okay. Other than that, any other method should be authorized. So what kind of authorization? I mean, which user can access which method, that also we have to mention. And in security config, we have said that this endpoint should be permitted all. That means no user login is required for this. Okay, so now let us bring up the application and test this endpoint. See, application is up and running. There is no issue. Let us now try to access the endpoint. Welcome. Okay. Fine. Enter. So what we are able to see, welcome to the bookstore. Okay. And no login and password is asked. Whereas if I remove this welcome and we'll just try to access all the books available in the bookstore, let us see what happens. It is prompting us to enter username and password. Okay. So what is the username? User1. Okay. And password is pass1. Sign in. So now what is happening? It is asking us username and password for any other URL. Alright. Also we can try accessing a specific book, let's say B2. Okay. Enter. We are able to access it because we are already logged in now. So what we have done? We have restricted certain URLs for authentication, always authentication, and we have unrestricted certain URL for no authentication. Fine. So what we have covered in this session, we started with why securing the application is needed, how to secure your Spring Boot application with Spring Security, what features Spring Security brings in, why is it so powerful, and how to apply Spring Security in your Spring Boot application with the basic authentication, specifically in-memory user details authentication. Fine. In next session, I will be telling you how to apply role-based security in the application, first with in-memory user details manager itself, and then we will be further expanding the application with how to store username and password in the database and how to get username and password from the database and then validate, then authenticate your application. Alright, so we'll be further expanding this application in our subsequent session.
Congratulations! I hope you are able to understand Spring Security internals and able to apply that in your project. If you have any doubts or anything you would like to ask your doubts in the comment section below. Share the channel and session details with your friend, family and colleague, because that is how we will grow more stronger together. There are more and more Java, Spring Boot, Microservices sessions available on the channel. So if you haven't yet watched them, feel free to watch them. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet subscribed, because such kind of sessions I'll continue bringing on this channel. Alright, so see you in the next session. Bye for now.